Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. Luis Godoy was born in Michoacan, Mexico. He immigrated to this country with his family as a young boy and grew up working on farms of Northern California, picking and cutting fruit. By the age of 7, he would come home from school and work with his parents. There was little time for homework, and he barely had enough time to learn English, and he often felt like he was falling behind in school. He became a father during his senior year of high school, and it was a moment that changed his life forever. Even while juggling work, family, and school, he managed to graduate on time. And after graduation, he worked as a cook, mechanic, medical assistant, and eventually an X-ray technician. In his mid-20s, he built up the confidence to return to school and pursue his dreams of becoming a doctor. He attended Solano Community College and later transferred to UC Davis, where he earned a degree in biology and was accepted to the School of Medicine. Today, he's a cardiothoracic surgeon and an assistant professor at UC Davis School of Medicine and UC Davis Health System. He's been recognized with numerous honors, including induction into the Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society, Gold Humanism Honor Societies, and awards such as the UC Davis Medal. He's a strong believer in the power of mentorship, striving to lift others to achieve their dreams. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speaker today, and I will now pass it over to him.
Hey, Thank you, Christina, for that kind and warm introduction. And nobody has better nerdy jokes than Jubin and Pi Day today. So happy Pi Day. Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's really a pleasure to join you all today, and thank you guys for joining the webinar on your Saturday morning. So I'm gonna share my screen here, if you don't mind. I have a couple of slides that I'll go through, and I hope you can see them okay. Um, like Christina mentioned, I'm a thoracic surgeon at UC Davis. Have been here on the faculty since about 2020, so about 5 years. And the trajectory, I'm going to go over a little bit about, what grit and resilience mean and how it applies to medicine. And the reason why, I decided to do this topic is because, with the trajectory that I had getting into medicine hasn't always been straightforward. So I'll give you a little bit of the background on myself, and then we'll go in and define what resilience and grit mean and how it applies to medicine. So let me advance here. So I'm a thoracic surgeon. This is a couple of photos of what I do. So you see me in the operating room with a team in the upper left-hand pictures doing some open heart procedures, minimally invasive procedures, robotic procedures. And this is basically like my identity as to who I am as a surgeon and as a physician. And when most people find out that I'm a thoracic surgeon, this is basically the image that kind of pops into their head. And as you know, and as we learn and grow and define ourselves in our careers and everything like that, it becomes a huge part of your identity as to who you are. But I didn't begin here. This is not where I started. Um, this is where I began. So um, uh, I was born in Mexico. I was born in a small town called Tacaswaro. Here you can see a bunch of pictures of me when I was a kid with a very, couple of very nice haircuts that my mom gave me that weren't so flattering. And this is basically where I started. I started with nothing and worked my way up to the point where I am today. This is the town where I was born. It's a small colonial town in Michoacan. A lot of indigenous roots, very underserved area. A couple of pictures of my dad and my sister, and that's me when I was a baby. This is probably the earliest photo I have of myself. Back then we didn't have the luxury of having cameras like you do on your phone now. Like you actually had to have a camera. And these other pictures here are the only pictures that I have of myself when I was a kid because for the same reason we didn't have cameras. So these are all old Polaroid pictures, as you can tell, and they're all worn. This is not like these aren't like frames that I put for just for to enhance the photos, but these are the actual scanned photos. How you can see how they're all old and worn. But that's basically how we grew up in Mexico. So that's a picture of my mom and my sister in the upper left in front of our adobe house. You can look at the sidewalk, it's all cobblestone, and that's how the roads were back then. This picture in the bottom right is me and my uncle, and I'm holding this old radio that he had given me. And the thing about this radio is that it was broken and it didn't work. But since we didn't have the luxury of toys or having things to play with, this was like my one and like only possession that I had. And so I carried that thing everywhere I went, even though it didn't work. And I would, even at that age, just I had like this innate curiosity of like, how this thing works and what's broken with it and can I fix it? So I would spend time, taking this thing apart with like a little screwdriver and putting it back together. And when I reflect back in my journey as to, how I became interested in surgery and how things work and fixing and repairing things, that was probably one of the earliest times where I could think, where I would have something that wasn't working or something that needed to be fixed and diagnosed and repaired, and then just taking it apart and putting it back together. One of those little breadcrumbs along the way that I can say probably led to my interest in becoming a surgeon. Um, my family and I we migrated to the United States when I was a kid, and we grew up in Suisun Valley in Northern California. These are a couple of pictures of like the agricultural fields that we worked in. There's this irrigation pipe in the bottom left that uh, we used to lay out to irrigate the fields, and keep that in mind because I'm going to reference that a little bit later down this talk. But that's where we grew up. We'd go to school, we'd come home and go out and help our parents work. And every summer was like the worst because while other kids were going on summer vacations and summer trips or summer camp, like we were like working like from sun up to sundown like every single summer. So school was always kind of like a refuge to kind of escape that kind of condition. And when their opportunity for like summer schools came up, like that was great because like I got to go to school instead of like working from sun up to sundown. But despite that, it gets pretty challenging, especially the older that you get. So when I was in junior high, when you come to school with shoes that are kind of torn and dirty, and your hands are all cut up and stained from the fruits and from the elements and all of that, you start to like become self-conscious about that, and you start to try to. I mean, it's a very, very challenging age for anybody, like that time frame in middle school. Like you're trying to find your identity, you're trying to establish yourself. It's a very awkward age, and unfortunately, I fell into the social trap at that time, and decided to join a gang at that time because they were the ones that weren't getting bullied, they weren't getting picked on. Nobody messed with them, and I felt that that was one of the ways that I could avoid from getting either bullied or teased or picked on. And unfortunately, what comes along with that is, you get into trouble. You get into trouble in school, fights. By the time I was in my sophomore year of high school, I became another one of these statistics. So I was expelled from school for getting into fights, being involved in gangs. So I became one of these statistics in the mid 90s here. You can see the rates of Hispanic dropouts at that time was close to 36%, and that's kind of where I felt. Um, so that's that, I at that time I just didn't think, and wasn't paying attention and became another statistic like so many other people do. So during that year when I was out of school, I worked in construction. I worked as a mechanic. I worked as a cook. These are some pictures of a couple of things that I was doing. So I was This is another one of those little breadcrumbs along the way to my path of becoming a surgeon. Repairing and restoring cars, that was one of my passions. The car on the top left, I bought that car when I was 13 years old and basically restored it. And by the time I was 15, 16, I had a fully restored car. And on the bottom row of pictures, the man on the bottom left, his name was Gil. Um, he actually became, now that I think about it and reflect on my journey, he became one of like my earliest mentors. And so one of the things, along with grit and resilience and the struggle is finding mentors along the way. Now he's not a doctor, he's not a physician. He restores cars, but what he taught me was to be super attention detailed, like detail oriented. We paid attention to every single nut and bolt. We did everything right. You try to get it right the first time. Dedication. He like really taught me a lot that I still use to this day. That car on the bottom right with the 98, that's a car that Gil and I built together when I was like 14 years old, and that's like a multi-million dollar car. It's like a one of car in the world, and it's a multi-million dollar car, and I had the opportunity to work on that with him. So yeah, I was working these jobs, and that's what I thought I was gonna do. It wasn't until one day that I woke up and heard my parents getting up and getting ready to go to work, like at the crack of dawn. And it was, in the middle of winter and it was freezing cold. And I sat there thinking to myself, like, wow, my parents really sacrificed a lot for us to come to America, to the United States. And for me to let them down and become another statistic and drop out. And I just really had one of those moments that really hit me hard. Like, wow, I've really let them down with the dream that they had. When they packed up, there was three. I had two sisters at that time. They packed up their three kids and brought them to the United States with high hopes and dreams, and I just felt like a total failure. So what I did was I enrolled in independent study, figured out how I could study on my own without the distraction of school and getting into fights and getting into trouble and trying to be cool. I was able to focus on my jobs that I was doing, and then I would come home in the evening and I would like actually like knock out the schoolwork that they gave me to do. And so I was pretty successful at that. And um, within the past couple of months, I was able to catch up with the majority of the credits that I needed. And they actually let me come back to school because I had proven, that I could handle the caseload and do quite well, that they allowed me to come back for my junior year of high school. And so I became I met my wife when I was a junior, and we became teenage parents at that time. So that's my wife Frida and my son. And what that did is it really changed perspective. I started to work a little bit more. I really still kind of struggled in school, but I was able to complete all the courses that I needed to do to graduate with my class. So. This is me in 97 holding my son, and the picture on the left is two of my sisters and my mom. And as you can see by this transcript here, like I graduated with like a 2.6 GPA in high school. Thank God for this wood shop class that gave me the A, that I was able to get an extra unit to to actually graduate on time. But it wasn't until I was in my mid 20s that I decided to go back to school to become a doctor. There's a long additional side story that I'll kind of bypass here, but decided to go, pursue medicine. I was about 23 years old. Didn't know how to study. Didn't know how to write a paper because I barely did any of that in high school. But I feel, to me, I was like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to give it my all. So I started off at community college. So I went to Solano Community College in Fairfield, California. And the first guidance counselor that I went to see to let them, know what I wanted to do and how they could advise me. The first counselor that I talked to told me that I didn't have the grades or the background to go into medicine. That it was basically impossible. It's an impossible task given my track record. And so they recommended that I do, just like I'd done, uh, body work, mechanic work, and they gave me a bunch of workshop, paperwork on that. And so I left that meeting, I did not feel defeated by that. If anything, I felt more motivated, like, okay, well, she doesn't think I can do it, but I know I can do it. So I tossed those papers in the trash, walked out, and then I basically tried to navigate myself through the courses, So I would read on the, the catalogs, the course catalogs, and I would try to pick my classes. And I did a bunch of stupid things like out of order. For example, like I was taking physics before I took like trigonometry and stuff like that. So then you're like trying to learn the physics and then you're trying to teach yourself like the math, which is like super complex. And it was pretty hard, until I started to notice that several of the people in my classes were also like pre-med or science, like they were focused on science. And then I heard of this club called MESA, right? The Math, Engineering, Science Achievement program at Solano, and I joined them. And then through that, I was able to kind of like figure out like, okay, I'm not the only one who's on this path, and there was a dedicated guidance counselor who kind of helped me navigate the proper coursework and everything, and eventually, was able to get involved in these projects. So this project here that you see me working on this pipe, so this is that irrigation pipe, from the farm that I told you about earlier, and we built this power. It's not powerless. It uses like conservation of momentum power, right, to power this water pump, but does not require electricity. It doesn't require manpower, and it's a water pump that pumps water like uphill, just using the water's own momentum. And so I came up with this project, and it was for a village in Afghanistan after the war back in that time. And so designed this pump, built it. We had a project, built prototypes. This is one of the prototypes. We got them working, and then eventually we sent those pumps to the villages in Afghanistan so that they could have running water. And the reason why I mentioned that is because this project, in community college, like it paid huge dividends in medical school applications, and not just that, but like in residency applications. I mean, when I was interviewing for med school, people would see this and they'd be so like intrigued, like how is it possible that this pump pumps water uphill with no electricity, no like cranking pattern, like no manpower? How is it autonomously pumping water uphill? And so then, we talk about that. And since I'm very mechanical, I was able to like enthusiastically explain how things worked, and everybody was just like motivated, like captivated by the details. And even in residency, I had people asking me like, "Oh, can you just draw it to me, like how this works? Like I want to know how this works." And so even a project like this in community college, like I said, made a huge difference when it came time to apply to med school and to residency. Eventually, I was able to transfer to UC Davis and graduate in 2008 with a bachelor's degree in science and neurophysiology, and biology and behavior. And that was in 2008. So now, here is my wife, my son, Armando, and then now at this point we had two sons, Alonso. And in 2010, I was able to apply to med school and was admitted to med school. So in the top left, you see a picture of my family and my kids, and a picture of my parents in the middle, my son, and then in the on the right side is a picture of me and one of my this is one of my biggest mentors in medicine. His name is Frank Souza, um, and he's not a thoracic surgeon. He's not a like a general surgeon. He's an ophthalmologist, and he's not Hispanic. He's not Mexican like me. So one of the things I try to highlight to folks is, up to this point, two of my biggest mentors did not look like me, and they weren't surgeons like me, but they taught me things along the way to help guide me. And so Dr. Susan is an ophthalmologist, and throughout my med school career, as a MS1, MS2, MS3, he's somebody that I could always talk to, who gave me honest advice. His goal, the goal of your mentor is not to mold you into them, but to get you to where you want to be, to help you accomplish your goals. And that's what he did is, if he didn't know something about cardiothoracic surgery, he would put me he'd give me the connection to somebody who did know something about that. So the little things like that along the way really, really helped. And I was able to graduate med school and had a great time here. It was the best time of my academic career, because when I was in med school, that was like the first time where I was actually able to be a student 100% of the time and not have to worry about, having a job and paying bills and, doing those other things on the side, because here I could focus 100% on school. And this is where I became to be a lead, learn to become a leader for my community, for my patients, built up the courage to advocate for others. And then when I finished med school, decided to stay here for cardiothoracic surgery residency, and then ultimately stayed on as a faculty. Now, like I said, mentorship is huge. And this is a picture of Dr. Souza and myself. And he's presented me with the UC Davis University Medal. And this medal was given to him by his dean of the School of Medicine when he graduated med school in the 70s. And the dean at that time had told him, keep this medal, and you'll find somebody along, your span, along your way, that you feel deserves this medal. And after all of those years that he had this medal in his possession, he decided to hand that medal to me. So that's one of my prized possessions that I have, is that he presented me with this medal. So as the caption says here, it's a prestigious award that's bestowed upon an individual, which recognizes the very highest levels of distinction, personal achievement, and contributions to the ideals of higher education. So, kind of a full circle thing here with him handing that medal off to me, and who knows, maybe one day down the road I might meet one of you, and who, I'll pass this medal on to. So that just kind of goes to show, that the path that led me to where I am today was not very straight, was not very easy. If anything, was very challenging. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of places where I could have veered in the wrong direction, or I could have just given up. And so people say like, wow, you really got here, with your, due to your grit. And so grit, for anybody who has ever worked on cars, or like I did, right? So grit is like how rough a surface is, like the grit on the sandpaper, right? But that's not like the how it's defined in education and medicine. So this book by Angela Duckworth is basically a book that details the definition of grit and what is grit, and it defines it. And so What grit is, it's basically having passion and perseverance for long-term goals. It means continuing to work towards something even when it becomes difficult, and even when you fail. A lot of people think that success is mostly about talent, but there's a lot of research out there that shows that effort and persistence oftentimes matter even more than talent. There's a lot of talented people who don't make it. Um, and so people with grit tend to stay focused on their goals, and they keep pushing forward even when things get challenging. So here's five characteristics of grit that were defined within that book, and so there's five main traits that help to define grit. So these include courage, which is being willing to face fear and learn from failure, and conscientiousness, which means being hardworking and disciplined. Grit also involves long-term commitment and resilience, so that people can keep going even after setbacks. And finally, it focuses on improving over time instead of trying to be perfect from the beginning. Um, Enthusiasm is common, and endurance is rare. So I put these gifts at the bottom because I'm a huge boxing fan, and I used to box when I was younger. And the two fighters at the bottom of the screen are Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez. They're two of the greatest fighters to basically live during my era. But these two basically fought for four fights. They fought 42 rounds without a clear winner. And the image on the bottom left is they don't show the full fall, but where Manny Pacquiao hits Juan Manuel Marquez and Juan Manuel Marquez goes down, like he gets dropped from that punch. And then the image on the bottom right is at the very, very end. This is the 42nd round that these two have been going at it back and forth in their fourth fight, where Marquez just lands this solid shot and Manny Pacquiao gets knocked out. And so he ultimately wins by drastic knockout. And this is, Manny Pacquiao had dropped Juan Manuel Marquez multiple times during all of their fights, and he never gave up. He always kept coming back and eventually won, but in the sweetest way possible by like a just a this massive knockout that was all over TV and the news and everything. So, resilience. So, what is resilience? So, it's the ability to bounce back from difficult situations or challenges. As in my previous slide, resilience is one of the components of grit. So, this is a like a they're both they're not exclusive. If anything, resilience plays a huge part of grit. So everyone that experiences setbacks at some point. People that are resilient are able to recover and keep moving forward instead of giving up when things go wrong. Specifically, they learn from their experiences. This skill is important for handling stress and achieving long-term goals. And like the previous slide, Mark has learned from a bunch of the punches that he took to the face. He learned to get up. He learned from his mistakes and he perfected, and then eventually came back to the victory. And I really like this image that's up here because some people are really weighed down by their failures, and it's very easy to just give up and feel sorry for yourself. But it's the people that are actually learning, and this is what happens in science a lot. I mean, some of the biggest breakthroughs in medicine and in science in general, it wasn't a discovery that just occurred just because it did. It's because there were multiple experiences and trials and experiments that had failed to where they learned, how to make things better and improve until you finally get to the big breakthrough. And so that's one of the fundamental things in medicine is trying to build on failures, learn from them, and keep moving forward. So these are some of the characteristics of people that are resilient. So they're adaptable. and able to adjust when the situations change. They also try to maintain a positive mindset and focus on solving problems rather than dwelling on difficulties. Um, Having strong emotional control and support from others also helps people stay resilient. Now, like I put here in the blue, resilience is not about avoiding falls. It's about learning how to rise from them. Now, the back to the slides at the bottom, back to the fighters. This is a um, uh, the analogy that I gave myself when I was in med school as when I was studying for a test. I was like training for the fight, and the test was the fight, and you know that a fight's not going to be easy. You're going to get hit in the face, and just like a test, you're going to get questions that are hard. But you don't want to, if you in the middle of the fight get hit in the face, which is going to happen, you don't want that to just, you don't want to catastrophize and panic and like give up, right? You're going to learn from that and move forward. That's basically what I tried to do. And these slides at the bottom, I put them here because this is, one of the relationships of mentoring. That's Marcus and his trainer. Now, his trainer has trained him his entire career since he was a kid. He loves him. This is like his son. He has his best interest at mind. And as you can see in the first image on the left, Marcus is he's getting beat up. He's having a tough time. I mean, he looks almost defeated sitting in that stool. But then you look at his trainer who's telling them like, "No, you can do it. This is what you need to do. Do this, do that." He's motivating him. Now, he doesn't look happy while he's telling them, but he's telling them the truth and he's telling them what he needs to be doing. And you look at that middle picture, and he's like imploring to him, like, "Hey, wake up, do what we practice. Do you got this?" And then look at the final picture on the right, ultimately he achieves success. Your trainer, your mentor is not supposed to tell you like what you want to hear or make things easier. They're supposed to tell you the truth, and they're supposed to give you honest advice and honest feedback and help you to pull out, to dig deep and pull out the successful person that you are. And oftentimes it might not feel nice when somebody's giving you honest criticism or feedback, but it's like super important in order to move on to the next step. So grit and resilience, they're related, but they're slightly different. So grit focuses on staying committed to the long-term goals and continuing to work towards them over time. And resilience is more about how somebody responds to the challenges and setbacks and how they quickly recover. In simpler terms, grit helps you keep going towards the goal, while resilience helps you bounce back from when things go wrong. Now, that's the opposite of resilience is burnout. You get emotional exhaustion, cynicism, loss of meaning. You start questioning, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I here? This is so hard. You start to psych yourself out, and resilience is the opposite of that. So what is the role of resilience and grit in medicine, and why does it matter? So medical training and practice, they're very high pressure, it's very demanding. There's long hours, stress, and even after a stressful long hours, you're like 20 hours in, you have to make critical decisions. It's emotionally demanding. Some of the things in medicine in general and as an undergrad moving up, it's like you get this, it's very high pressure. You're constant testing, fear of failing. When you're on the wards, getting pimped and getting asked questions in front of groups of people can be very stressful because you get put on the spot. You don't want to be exposed for the imposter that you feel you are, right? With people who have imposter syndrome, you're constantly walking around feeling like, oh man, somebody's gonna expose.
Can you explain to them what pimping is? Because they might not know.
Yeah, yeah. So pimping is when you're basically rounding as a group or even in the office one-on-one, where one of the attending doctors starts asking you like, okay, this person has abdominal pain, nausea, like what is the differential diagnosis and what is the workup, and then they basically rapid fire ask questions to you to test your fund of knowledge, and then you're supposed to answer back. Uh, uh, if you don't answer correctly, then they start and asking you in other ways. The goal is to try to get you to pull out your knowledge rather than to make you look bad. And then if you do answer the question correctly, then they can follow up with some more challenging questions. So it's basically a practice meant to kind of like stretch you a bit. And if you do know it, then they'll try to get you to the point to where you get to somewhere that you may not know it, but it's like a mental exercise that they do. So, but it can be very stressful. Sometimes you're in front of a group of like your peers and other med students and residents and nurses, and they're asking you, you're put on the spot, to test your knowledge. And that can be very, very stressful. Patient complications are stressful to deal with as well. And then, if you finish you get into med school and you're in your fourth year and you're applying to residency, the fear of not matching is probably one of the biggest stressors that somebody can face, because it's a career defining event if you don't match. So it's just like this huge, huge weight that you're carrying up until that point. And then there's the hidden curriculum within medical training, which revolves around this sense of perfectionism, right? The comparison between you and others, you start to see other residents or med students. You start comparing yourself like within your own mind to your peers, and you start to see like, wow, this person has it so much easier than I do, and they get better grades than I do, and they're so much smarter, and then you basically start to talk yourself down, which is difficult. The fear of failure is huge, and then the silence around struggle, right? We're all supposed to be going into medicine. We've proven ourselves. We got into med school. You proved yourself, and struggle is something that you shouldn't really see, right? It should come easy to you. You're by definition of getting into med school, on the higher end of the spectrum of intelligence, from the metrics that they use, right? And you're not supposed to struggle. But guess what? Everybody struggles, and you're not supposed to show it, right? And that's part of the hidden curriculum in medicine. And then these myths, right? Like there's students and there's some of your peers, like I had when I was a student, people who were always confident. They always knew everything. They studied very little and they got excellent grades. They got A's and knew all the answers. And the myth of that is that, you know what, like it's not that it just comes naturally to them, it's they're putting in the work, right? You just don't see it. Like they're learning somewhere, they're doing it some way, but you just don't see it. There's residents who are always stoic. They know all the answers. They know how to treat the patients, always unshaken, and that just goes back to that hidden curriculum. And then there's attendings who just walk in and they know it all. They give the patient this, give them that, do this and do that, get that test and do that, and you just like shoot off a bunch of orders, and then it's like, wow, the patient got better. Like, holy smokes, like, they know it all, but no, as a matter of fact, it's a graduated sense of responsibility from when you're a student to a resident. And we were all students, we were all residents, we've all put in all of those years of all having all of those things. So by the time you're in attending, things tend to become a lot more pattern. You start to notice patterns. It's not that you just all of a sudden knew it all. It's that you've been putting in the work all of those years to where now you've got this fund of knowledge that you can then use at the bedside. And so it can be intimidating when you're over here trying to struggle as a med student to come up with your differential diagnosis and to come up with the test you want to do and everything, because this is like your first time doing this, whereas the attending has done it like a million times, right? So it can be very intimidating to get questions wrong when you're pimped in front of the group. So resilience and grit basically are the foundation of a career in medicine. So resilience can be developed through intentional habits. So reflecting on difficult experiences really helps to take those mistakes and turn them into learning opportunities. Maintaining healthy routines, sleeping adequately, exercising, mindfulness. This is a picture up in the top right of me sleeping, and that's a picture of my daughter when she was born in the hospital, and I was in the hospital, and I was on call. My wife comes in, and I was a med student at that time, and she delivered our daughter, and that's me sleeping with my daughter in the hospital bed, which, I woke up with like a sore back the next morning, but not the most comfortable. But sleeping and being mindful, making time for your family and stuff, seeking mentorship and peer support. There's nobody who understands what you're going through more than like your peers, people that are going through the same path. I was the first in my family to go to go to college and to go to med school. And so they didn't understand what I was going through. They would always say like, "Oh, you'll do great," or, "It'll be worth it," kind of thing. Because they don't know how hard it is. They don't know the struggle you're going through. So seek peers, seek mentors along the way that can help guide you, somebody you can just talk to when things get tough, because that's one of the most important things. Um, Also reminding yourself who you are, why did you come to medicine? Well, why did you want to pursue medicine in the first place? Um, Maintain that in the back of your mind, because when things get tough, you always have to think of like, this is my goal. This is why I chose to do this. And this is why I want to do this. This was, I wanted to either help people, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. Just think back of the what drove you to choose medicine. And then the bottom bullet point here is to maintain your identity outside of medicine. What I mean by that is, do the things that you love. Don't let go of who you are or the things you love or your hobbies and what you do. It's not, you don't have to sacrifice everything in order to become a doctor. I put these slides of these cars right here, or this car. This is a car that I restored recently, and I'm still doing this. Even I started when I was like 10, 11 years old, and I still do that. And this is a car when it's restored. And then this picture on the bottom right is that's me and my wife and my first son. Like back to that picture when I was in high school when he was born. And this is our car. This is this car. And we got invited to do this photo shoot. We're Raiders fans, right? We've been Oakland Raiders fans for the longest time. And because the car is black and they wanted a black and silver photo shoot for the Raiders, they invited us to do this photo shoot. And so that's us doing what we love, right? Still doing what I love. I mean, I have a garage full of projects that I'm like working on all the time, because that's the way that I stay grounded. I stay true to who I am and do what I love. And then how do you strengthen grit? So it basically it develops through sustained commitment to meaningful goals. So breaking those long-term goals into smaller milestones can help keep your motivation and maintain it during those long periods of time. Consistent efforts and deliberate practice are essential for improving medical knowledge and clinical skills. And then viewing challenges as opportunities to grow really helps to maintain that perseverance, even when progress feels slow. um, Celebrate your victories. When you have a successful, when you pass a test, celebrate. When you graduate undergrad, when you transfer from community college to a university, celebrate that. When you graduate, when you get to med school, all of those victories, celebrate them. Celebrate them with your family and your friends. Community matters. No one becomes a physician alone. Your mentors, your peers, your families. Again, the picture of my first day of med school, um, my peers along the way that I leaned on during the times of struggle. This is me working and as a med student, and then this is me on our match day. So first day of a student, last day of a med student. Look who's in my corner, it's Dr. Souza. Now, with my family of three children here. So full circle, right? With my mentor who basically walked with me the path from my first day of med school to my very last day. And he was there to celebrate with us when I matched. So in closing, medicine will challenge you intellectually, emotionally, and physically. Resilience helps you rise after those difficult moments, and grit keeps you moving forward towards your purpose. Together, they help you become the physician that your patients need. Medicine's not perfect, and it's not does not need perfect people. It needs resilient ones. And one of the things that I like to highlight are, even now that I'm in attending, this was a picture of when I was in working at the hospital, and the hospital decided to use, my image here for their advertisements. And my daughter came by and she wanted this picture next to her dad, so we took that picture. And the picture right next to that is, when she saw me walking down the hallway in the hospital, she ran up to me and gave me like this big hug. And so, making time for your family and friends and celebrating things like that is important. And again, I'm not a perfect person, far from it. I've had more failures than anybody has ever had, and but I am a hard worker. I am resilient. I don't let things wear me down, and ultimately, I get to the goal of becoming the surgeon that I am today. I always dedicate these types of talks to my nephew Isaac, who became another statistic when he was a teenager. He lost his life due to gun violence. He wanted to become a doctor. He would always talk to me about medicine. He would always be interested in what I was doing. And I knew that he wanted to be a brain surgeon. He didn't want to be a thoracic. He wanted to be a brain surgeon. And he was like, shaping his life towards that. And he would have been a great brain surgeon until his tragic death. And so I dedicate these talks to him. And I can only imagine what him and his cousins are like talking about here. This is in church. This is a church picture. So what are these guys talking about? And what are they doing that's, so funny in church? So I always wonder that, but I always like that picture because, that smile that he has is so telling of his personality. So with that, I'll conclude and I'll open up to any questions that you all may have. Thank you for the invitation for me to be here today.
Thank you so much. We have so many questions. I'll start up with the first one. So they say, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Godoy. It's been incredible to hear your experiences. Do you have any recommendations for career changers who are pursuing medicine later in life or on breaking into the field without a STEM degree or clinical hours of research? And how can some of us stand out against those with traditional applications with so much less time?
Yes, that's a very good question. And in order to try to keep this talk within the time frame, I did kind of fast forward through a couple of things. So I was a career changer myself. I did start off as a medical assistant. I worked for a couple of years as an X-ray tech. Eventually, before I had this moment where I decided that I wanted to do medicine. And believe it or not, like people who have had other careers, there's a lot that you bring to the table that is of high value. People with life experience, work experience, things like that that are like very important that we need in medicine. which is different from people who kind of just go straight through, who've like never had a job, you've never had a deadline to meet, never had to balance a budget, you never had to balance family and education and all of that, right? So there's a lot of skills that you bring to the table. um, for people who don't have like the academic background, there are post-bac programs that people can apply to that will help you gain some of those credits and help you with, say, like study habits, MCAT prep, help you, with science classes, and you're with like a group of peers that are also there to help you. So there's resources out there that you can look into. I know the University of California has a post-bac program. By the way, again, as part of leaving things out. So when I graduated in 2008 from UC Davis as an undergrad, I did apply to the post-bac program, and I actually got in the post-bac program at that time. And back then, you weren't supposed to apply to med school during the post-bac program, but I applied to med school. And so during that same cycle, and I did maybe I think one or two, I think I completed one semester and then got my acceptance into med school, and so then I didn't have to complete the year of post-bac because I was going to start med school. So post-bac programs are like super, super helpful. And that would be something that I would recommend for somebody who's like changing from like a completely different career who might not have that track record.
Thank you so much. So this next question asks, thank you for your time. For those of us who have different experiences, it sounds like we should apply our passions outside of medicine to it. This was great perspective. That doesn't seem like a question. Let me go to the
Yeah.
next
Yeah, definitely things that you're passionate about that I mean, when you're applying, you want to highlight the things that make you unique and things that are sought after in medicine. So you want to highlight, if you have something you can talk passionately about, that you know something a lot about, that you love doing, it can say a lot. Put those kinds of things in your applications. You don't want it to be like if it's not medicine related, or if it's not, academic related, you don't want it to, overtake your entire essay or whatever, but your personal statement. But you can mention little things here and there in your application to highlight some of those things.
Thank you. This next question asks, did you face discouragement in believing you could finish your medical journey, or did you face any major challenges on your journey? If so, what helped you keep going and what motivated you?
Yeah, I remember when I was actually I remember when I was studying for the MCAT. I think that's when I was kind of at a point where, like when you take like a stick and you're like bending the stick and it's starting to crack and it's starting to crack. I think during that time was pretty tough because you're just like trying to cram so much, and there's only so much you can cram, and there's only so many hours in the day, and so um, I studied over the summer, and what I would do is I would, go to Shields Library at UC Davis and get one of those little cubicles, and that's where I would like park myself for like an 8-hour shift, right? So I would study in the morning, take a mid-morning break, study, take a lunch, study, take an afternoon break, and it kind of like treated it like a job. And I remember during that time, like there were moments where I kind of just sat there and like wondered, like, wow, like why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? Like this is like so hard, right? But then I decided, similar to what I mentioned was I started to think to myself, like, why I was doing this. Why did I decide to go on this path the first place? When I was working as a MA in X-ray, I was the only Spanish speaking person in the hospital, so I would translate for a lot of patients, and you could see the look on patients' faces when they see you that you speak their language and you understand what they're saying. You can explain things to them, and I got to work with a lot of like really, really, really good doctors who treated every single patient with like high levels of respect. And then you got to see some other doctors that were just like horrible, like they were so judgmental and treated people, differently. And so I always thought to myself, well, if that idiot can do it, like so can I, right? So then, so I would just kind of like pump myself up during those times just to move forward. And the other thing I didn't mention is during this whole process of going back to starting at community college, going to undergrad, and applying to med school, I never told my parents. I never told them what I was doing because I didn't want to give them high expectations and then let them down if I failed. So I never told them. The first time that my parents found out that I wanted to be a doctor was immediately after I got the call that I got accepted to med school. That's when I called my mom and I told her. And you know, to me, that was like just hearing her voice on the other end was like it's been worth it ever since. So even now and when things get tough, when things got tough in residency and things get tough, you just think about those moments, to get you through.
Definitely. Thank you. So this one says, I'm currently a high school senior who is enrolling into Solano Community College before transferring out to receive my BS in biology. My question is, when did you start studying for the MCAT? Would you recommend studying for it while in community college? If not, what do you recommend for pre-med college students to do in order to stand out in your application during their transfer season?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, I wouldn't recommend starting right away because um, the MCAT prep and the MCAT materials are a little bit more condensed and they don't give you like the entire details of what they're testing you on. That's what you're supposed to be learning like in undergrad, right? So that's your sole focus should be on learning the material as best as you can, building that foundation base, and basically it's like like building a building, right? You got to have a solid foundation so that once you get to that point, then it's more like of a refresher kind of thing that you're going through, and you're like, okay, yeah, this I know, this I know. Um, um, Typically, some people start studying either like in their junior year, sometimes in their senior year of college. When they start hitting the books preparing for the MCAT. It all really depends on when you want to apply. Now, you don't want to overdo it because there's like a diminishing returns kind of thing where you can only cram so much or you can only fit so much before you start losing other things, right? So I'd recommend, not focusing on it so much early on and then just focusing on your academics now that are in front of you. Because if you start focusing on resources that are not pertinent to your classes or your course load, you might struggle in those, and then that's going to really set you back even more.
Yeah, and also just you need the foundation to learn how to learn science. And so if you're taking your general bio and chemistry, you need to like get those down because you don't want to have to relearn them. So, you know, don't just focus on the MCAT, but learn how you learn. And that is an art to it because certain people learn through visual, some people audio, some people kinetic. And then also part of it is you don't want to have to remember how to do stoichiometry. You know, you should be able to have that down pat down. Um, and also, and we put some links on there that, you know, we've done like so many sessions of the MCAT that I think like we have. So I've just put some of those on there you can take a look at as well.
So this next question asks, I would love to know if you have any tips for imposter syndrome in overcoming the fear of failure, if you're a first person in your family trying this.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's like a common type of theme, nowadays is this imposter syndrome thing that I know when I got into med school, I was like wondering like, oh man, like any day now somebody's gonna walk in and be like, oh, we made a mistake. But it wasn't, you know who got me over that was my mentor, Dr. Souza. He told me one day, he's like, and he kind of cut it off at the head, right? Like I wasn't talking to him about that. It was something we were having some other conversation of something else. And he goes off on this little talk that he had, and he's like, I want you to know that you're here because you earned it. He's like, you earned it. You worked your ass off to get here. Nobody handed you anything. This is, I mean, you belong here, and that's something that always stuck in my head. Even now, right? So when I go to like a national meeting of thoracic surgeons and I'm giving this presentation in front of, hundreds of other surgeons, you start to like question yourself a little bit and you're like, no, wait a minute, I earned it. I worked my way here. Nothing was given to me. If anything, things were twice as hard for me, right? And so keeping that mindset and acknowledging those moments of self-doubt and then just reasoning your way past those, I think is important, If you don't acknowledge that and then it can kind of weigh down on you. But you wanna harness that and then move forward with it. So regardless of how people make and sometimes it's not you, right? Sometimes people make you feel that way, and as long as you in your heart know like no, I earned my way here, um I belong here, then you can keep moving forward no matter how people try to make you feel.
Tell them that story when you were at the conference and the cab driver.
So I think I was in Toronto. I was in Toronto, and there was this I was getting from the convention center back to my hotel, and it was kind of sprinkling, so I get a cab, and this cab driver pulls up, and I get in the cab, and on the way to the hotel, he starts talking to me about like, oh, why are you in town? Like we just start chit chatting, right? And I told him, I'm at this thoracic surgery surgeons conference here, and he's like, oh, that's a big conference, and he says, you know, you don't look like the other surgeons that I pick up. And it wasn't in a bad way, right? It wasn't he was an immigrant himself. And he was telling me about his story, and he's like, you don't act like some of the other surgeons and you don't look like the other surgeons. And we started chit-chatting, and um he starts telling me, he's like, oh yeah, he's like, back in my village, I was a fisherman. I forget which country I think he was from, I forget which country he was from, but he was telling me about being a fisherman. He's like, some days you cast a net and you catch a fish, and sometimes you don't. So then he told me, he's like, well, it's been slow at the conference. He's like, everybody taking like Ubers and all of that, right? And so he's like, I'll tell you what. He's like, I'll be your personal taxi driver for the time that you're here for like $50, something like that, right? And he's like, because you remind me of me, and when I told him a little bit about myself, he's like, you're the kind of person that I want my children to grow up to be like. And he's like, that's why we came to this country. And so it was just one of those very like moments in time where people will uplift you sometimes, just by sharing your path with them. And he saw somebody that didn't look like the traditional thoracic surgeon, and that like piqued his interest, and he wanted to know a little bit more. And so I told him my life of being an immigrant and now doing this. And then he's like, yeah, this is he's like that. When I sit back and think about why I came here with my children, he's like, this is exactly why. So it's one of those motivational stories, that help pick you up along the way.
Thank you for sharing that story. That was so precious. So this next question is, could you expand on your career as a medical assistant in X-ray tech? How did they help you in your path to becoming the surgeon you are today?
Yeah, when I graduated high school, college to me was like the last thing on my mind. I mean, I had no background, no academic background, right? Like, barely made it through, barely graduated. I was working at a restaurant as a cook, and I met a couple of people, and uh, one guy in particular that I met at that time, this kind of set my foot in one direction that I wasn't initially planning on. He was like a director for like a surgery clinic, like an orthopedic surgery clinic. And he told me, he says, "Hey, um, you're such a hard worker. You're like smart. You're intelligent. This and that." Because I got to know him and his family, and he's like, "I'll tell you what. If you go to school and get your X-ray tech's license, he's like, we're looking to be hiring somebody, within the next year or two. By the time you finish, you'll be ready, right?" So then I started looking into programs like, are there any like not like college like degree programs, but are there any programs that can help me kind of get my foot in the door? And so I started to look around, and I found a program in Sacramento, that gave you like an associate's degree type of limited X-ray tech license. And as part of that, you become, you get like a medical assisting kind of certificate as well. And so that's what I ended up doing. And so I worked in Sacramento for a while, and then eventually I started to work closer to home. I was working in the Napa Valley, and for those of you who may or may not know the Napa Valley, it's like two groups of people almost. Basically, it's like the wealthiest of the wealthiest, like winery owners who own, hundreds of acres. And then there's the people who work the land, right? You got all the farm workers and vineyard workers, winery workers. And when I was working there, that's where I started to get the exposure to medicine that I never had before. So I started to work with doctors. I started to work, with the teams. I was interpreting a lot. And I think the fact that I was interpreting, I was actually able to kind of bridge the gap between the patient and the physician. And I could actually this is where they tell you like, oh, if you picture yourself in the role, you'll make it happen, right? Like this self-manifesting destiny kind of thing. And I was actually picturing myself in the role. And so patients would call to the clinic, and they'd call with questions, but they wouldn't call to ask for the doctor. They would call and ask for me because I spoke the language. So that experience really shaped my path, and it really, I mean, if it had not been for that, I don't know what I would be doing right now if I didn't have that exposure and that experience.
And I would just add also, with your permission, that you didn't get this job for med school experience. You got this job because you needed a job, and
Yeah, yeah, I
so
yeah,
this is a lot of the some people try to get those jobs for med school or PA school, but you did it because the job, and healthcare jobs tend to pay a little bit more, and there's more needs of it.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, the reason why I really took that job was one, right? Because I needed a job that most importantly, more important than money and salary and anything, was provided health insurance for my son, right? And for me, because that was, I mean, to me, I was like, what if something happens to him, right? So that was like the biggest thing, because I used to hear about people taking jobs that had great benefits, and I'm like, well, what the hell are benefits? I don't know what are benefits, right? Like, I didn't know that people got health insurance from jobs, and that's, if you got sick, you had coverage, right? Like, because growing up, I never had health insurance. And so learning that I could have a job like this, where you're not working out in the sun 15 hours a day, breaking your back, and you're getting paid decent money, and you have health insurance for your children. To me, that was like the primary thing. Like medicine, still, even at that point, was the furthest thing on my mind. I had no intention of applying to med school. I had no intention of going back to college until I started to experience some of the disparities in medicine during that experience.
Thank you. This next question is, I'm very interested in cardiothoracic surgery because of my own father and his heart complications in the past. Why did you choose this specialty in particular?
So I kind of knew that I wanted to be a surgeon because of, so when I'm, working on my car, right, as a teenager, taking things apart, like I could be doing that for like, 20 hours straight without eating, and time just goes by fast because you're like focused and you're doing what you love. And uh, when I did my medical school, med school third year rotations, when I rotated on surgery, like I was in the OR and like I knew like, okay, wow, like this is great. Like this is what I was supposed to do. I want to be a surgeon. Um, but during third year, you also see other rotations and other specialties, and you rotate on internal medicine, pediatrics, OB-GYN, all of that. So I rotated first on, I actually put surgery at the very end because I wanted to experience everything else first to see if there was something else that just kind of clicked. Is something else gonna like click, and maybe I might want to do that, and then I'll leave surgery to the end to see if it's truly what I want to do. And so, in internal medicine, that was a close second because this is where you're taking, the patient's symptoms, you look at their labs, you look at their history, you look at the imaging, you take all of these together, and it's like solving a puzzle, like trying to solve a puzzle. And you're trying to figure out what's going on with them, and then you come up with your hypothesis as to what might be going on, and then you test that hypothesis by, giving the medications or doing the labs and all of that. So there was this diagnostic mindset that I really enjoyed. And then when I got to the cardiology part of it, I just love the anatomy and the physiology. But still, I went through my rotations, did surgery. I knew I wanted to do surgery, and I decided to choose cardiothoracic surgery because all of those pieces of what I liked in internal medicine and surgery itself, and they came together. Like some of the highest level of physiology, the cardiopulmonary system. You got some of the sickest patients in the hospital in the cardiothoracic ICU. Um, it's very gratifying work to be able to repair, either someone's heart and you restore their function, or for example, remove somebody's cancer. You remove somebody's lung cancer. You like cured their lung cancer. There's immediate gratification from some of those things. And then you get to build these long-term relationships with the patients as well. So, yeah, the part of being able to fix something, being in the OR for like a long operation, it just seems like it goes by so fast because I'm kind of like zapped back to when I was a kid taking things apart. I'm like back in that zone of like where I'm in this flow of surgery, and I love what I do. And, it doesn't seem like a job half the time because I enjoy doing it so much.
Dr. Godot, would you tell them when do you have to decide what you want to be when you grow up
I'm
in
sorry, what
med
was that?
when you have to decide what you want to do when you're done with medical school?
Oh,
So like residency, like when do you choose it?
yeah, yeah. So, some people come into medical school knowing exactly what they want to do. The vast majority of people are basically like undifferentiated, right? You're like a stem cell who hasn't differentiated yet into whatever cell you're gonna be. And so, during the your med school journey, from MS1, MS2, some people still are not quite sure. In your third year, that's where you kind of get a little taste of everything. So you go through all the specialties. But that's kind of typically, usually by your third year, you got to start thinking as to what you may want to do. In previous years, before they made the USMLE step scores pass fail, that used to happen like in your second year because you know depending on how you did on your step score, that would really narrow down your specialty of whatever you wanted to go into. But since it's pass fail now you can basically bump that up to like your third year, where you rotate through a bunch of different specialties and you see what you like, you see what you don't like. Um, and then by your fourth year, that's that's actually the year that you apply, you interview, and so by your fourth year, you kind of want to have that set because you're planning things like elective rotations. So, for example, me, I'm interested in cardiothoracic surgery. Then I want to do some cardiothoracic surgery rotations, not just at my institution, but at other institutions to see is it really what I want to do. And once you do that, and during your fourth year, you fill out your application, your residency application, and then typically it's, October. Most are like November, December, some in January is when the interview season is up and running for residency. So yeah, typically around your third year, you kind of have to start narrowing down what you want to do. Now that there's a caveat though. For example, if you go into a specialty like say for example like internal medicine, then you can kind of delay that down the road because from internal medicine you can do fellowships in like GI, you can do fellowships in cardiology, you can do fellowships in nephrology, so from there you move on to another subspecialty as well.
Thank you for that. This next question asks, how and where did you look for clinical experience during your sophomore year as a pre-med, and what skills are most sought after or help the most to earn an internship during your pre-med?
So looking for this is during your sophomore year as a pre-med. So um, you know, like a lot of the some of the universities have things like student-run clinics. So joining student-run clinics I know UC Davis has several free student-run clinics, and they run basically with student volunteers. So applying and joining some of those is a good experience because you're working with physicians, you're working with med students, you're working with PAs, you're working with PA students, med students, like I mentioned. So these are the people that you can talk to get advice as to how to get to where they are. So that's a good experience to have. Volunteering at community clinics. So there's your local community clinic. They're oftentimes looking for volunteers where you can join and spend some time there. Like I know one of the things that I did was I worked at a like for the Yolo County public health. They had a prescription assistance program for people who didn't speak English. And I would help them fill out applications and I would go through their paperwork and I would help them get their prescription coverage. Programs like that are important. And let me see, what was the other part of the question?
It was in regards to internships
Oh,
and what skills are sought after.
internships. I guess it ultimately depends on what. I mean, there may be programs that have internships. I don't know of any myself at this point. I know sometimes they have like summer internships that you can apply to. But yeah, I guess that would have to be specific as to like what internship you're looking into and going on their website and looking at what the requirements are and you know uh, w- talking to students who have gone through them. So
Thank you. This next question thanks you for your time. I'm especially interested to hear about how you managed medical school and residency while also being a father, husband, etc. As an individual who is planning to apply to medical school within the next 2 years, one of my biggest concerns is managing my personal and family life as I'm in my late 20s and plan to start a family.
so that's a very good question and when people ask me, what my biggest challenges were in med school and all of that. People expect like, oh, it's the academics and this and that. And that wasn't the case. Like to me, the academics part, um, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed medicine. The most challenging thing for me was the home work-life balance, right? Trying to balance my family time and my academic time, and it was a lot of self-sacrifice. And I do have to say that a lot of my fundamentals were ingrained in me as a kid, waking up at the crack of dawn to go to work in the morning and all of that. Well, I harnessed those experiences and I utilized that when I was in undergrad and in med school. So when my kids were home, right? When they're home with me, they're sleeping in the morning. So I'd wake up at the crack of dawn, 5 a.m. And that's when I would do my studying. I'd study from my schedule in med school was, I'd wake up around 5, have breakfast, get some exercise, start studying from about 6 a.m. to about 8 a.m. or whatever time classes started. But I knew that if I started early, that my kids weren't going to miss me because they're asleep, right? They're tucked in bed, they're comfortable, they're dreaming. And I'd go to school. If I finished at 3, finished at 4, then I would stay and I would continue to study until 5 p.m. And then by the time 5 p.m. came, it's like I'm getting home from work. So I'd come home, I'd help them with homework. We'd have dinner, we'd watch TV, we'd go out to the park, we'd do like that's how we maintained our family life. And by doing that every single day, I was able to study, like the previous day's material and then preview the day's material. And then at the end of the day, then just re-review some of the stuff. And I was able to get all of that work in during that time that for the most part I was able to have the weekends off and like go out to the zoo and do stuff with my family. It takes a very understanding partner for sure. Like my wife has been with me every step of the way, and by no means have things been easy. There's been times where they've been challenging, but it's doable. It's doable, especially if you have somebody who's there to support you.
Yeah, the key of it is marry someone who's way out of your league.
Was that a jab, Juven? He was
Hey, all
jabbing.
I know is I remember your wife used to make your lunches with the little things, and so I don't know.
That's true though. That's true.
So the hint, hint.
Yeah.
Hey, she is definitely the better half. I
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'll have to tell her that you said this.
So
Um,
this next question is, how do you balance sharing your experiences without it sounding like you're simply trauma dumping?
yeah, so what I tried to do, and some I mean, medicine itself is a very, very conservative type of field. And I tried to share my experiences, basically not to trauma dump. Many people have told me along the way, like, oh, you shouldn't mention this, you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't say that, don't do right. But you know what? Like, ultimately, it's my story. It's who built. This is how I was uh, uh, formed and shaped along the way to be where I am today. I know I'm not the only one who has had these types of struggles, and people can learn from that. You'd be surprised how many current medical students reach out to me that are in med school who say like, hey, I heard your talk, you know, 5 years ago at this place, and I was struggling. I saw myself in similar shoes, and your talk helped shape me and helped change my mind. And now I'm in med school, So that's why I do it. It's not to highlight the trauma or me. If anything, I really hate the spotlight. I hate public speaking. It's definitely not why I do it. It's because I find that sharing my story and my challenges, um, and the fact that being able to overcome those is very helpful to other people, you know. And so that's why I do it.
This next question asks, what advice do you have for students with disabilities who want to pursue a career in healthcare, especially when they face barriers or discouragement during their training?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I know who have become doctors with disabilities. A lot of your campuses have resources that are available. You know, I had a student one time who was legally blind. And he was a med student, right? I had the people who have the invisible disabilities, right? Learning disabilities, dyslexia and things like that are challenges. But like I said, there's disability offices like at the campuses that can help you with resources. Um, uh, some of the post-bac programs have learning experts that help you like basically like try to identify your learning style, identify any weaknesses. You can see learning specialists and things like that because a lot of the times there's people who have learning disabilities who have never been diagnosed. So there's resources that are available, and I've known a lot of people that are successful even with disabilities, and they've become phenomenal doctors.
Yeah, I know a couple people. I know a internal medicine resident who's now attending. He was deaf, and so there's things that like legally your institutions have to support you. So if you're deaf, he had translators. I know another person who was in a wheelchair um, and was actually PM&R, I think it was. And so yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, there's people come in all shapes and sizes, and a learning disability is like when you find out like the steps that you need to take if you need extra time for exams, but you have to plan for them and also ask for help and not be like afraid because it's a legal thing. It's not so much um like they have to accommodate you. So, and if you don't advocate for yourself, they're not going to. And so you just got to speak up.
Yeah, and once you've identified um, a particular disability or your doctor has identified something, then like I said, there's a lot of resources that are available.
So our last question is, how did you decide that medicine was for you? You mentioned grit and resilience a lot, so I was wondering how you decided that you wanted to pursue medicine and that it was worth the grit that it took.
So yeah, I guess it all kind of comes down to like what I was mentioning earlier. There's experiences along my way that really shaped who I was. And the things that were innate to me, like the curiosity of um, figuring out how things work and like when things went wrong, like how to fix it. Like there's that it's like this fascination that I had, and it wasn't until I got to that experience working as a X-ray tech and medical assistant that I could see like, wow, I can apply that same curiosity to like the human body. And I mean, that was the moment when that light bulb turned on. Like, wow, like this is amazing. Like I mean, the human body is a miracle I mean, it's a miracle that any of us are like alive, right? But I was just so fascinated by the anatomy and the physiology, the complexity, and was able to apply those things that I really enjoyed and loved to that, And so that's when I knew at that point, like this is what I want to do. Medicine's definitely what I want to do, you know. And regarding the grit and was it worth it? The struggle and everything, like yeah, hands down, yes, I would do it again if I had to. Because like I said, I really love what I do and getting to to accomplish the goal that you set forth, and it's like a massive goal and you accomplish it. There's just no other feeling like it. So yeah, hands down, it was definitely worth it, and I would do it all over again if I had to. I would meet Jubin all over again if I had to. Only if I had to, though.
Oh God, I'm sorry. Alrighty, well, no more questions, and you're three minutes past your deadline. So thank you again, Dr. Godoy, for coming, and good seeing you again. And yes, Rita is definitely your better half, and it's recorded. And so, anyways, but thank you again. Glad everyone was able to join us today, and everyone have a good high day.
Well, thank you again, Jubin. Good to see you.
Good seeing you,
Take
man.
care. Bye.